it makes you understand why people are just like sticking with, they're cutting the cord altogether and just like using their, their computer and some sort of a, another screen.
Exactly. Yeah, it's gotten rather amazing. So, in terms of getting ready for school, what issues are you seeing besides the ethics studies, etc.?
Well, because of our funding crisis, right. We are definitely going to have, we're definitely going to have much bigger class sizes than we've been having. Mm-hmm. And what I find is that in order to, teaching larger classes requires just different pedagogy and strategies. So I'm just kind of when I first came to SFUSD, I had huge classes, and then we got class sizes down, and now they're going back. So I'm just having to kind of change change back to my methods that work for bigger classes. And the funny thing is, it's not really, I haven't seen that bigger classes have worse results. Right. They just require different approaches.
This is something that I always want to ask people about, because if you talk to the Center for American Progress and Brookings, mm-hmm. Brookings for a long time has put forward that the whole debate over class sizes is kind of fake, because the reality is that you can still teach with larger class sizes.
Yeah, I mean, it takes different methods. And there are definitely situations where you want to have smaller class sizes, especially with students who are very discouraged, who've had, bad experiences before, there are definitely students who need more one-on-one, mm-hmm. More personalized support. And, but those are not the courses that I'm teaching. The courses that I'm teaching are just kind of the general education, for everybody. And in those situations, I find that as long as you're adapting your methods to meet the need, the situation that you're facing, it's fine. But kids do need to learn a lot more independent learning strategies, which means you need to teach them those strategies. That's the only way to, they aren't born knowing how to do that stuff.
Exactly. Okay, Susan, are you on board?
I am.
Good morning.
Hi, Susan.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
We're out we're getting our pond cleaned up and trying to save Bindi, our goldfish, that looks like maybe she had a little incident when we had that blue heron in the backyard that ate 3/4 of our pond.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, yeah. She's tough, we're hoping, but, it's rough being a captain of the Golden Fish Warriors.
Oh, my God. Is that what you call it? I love it, the Golden Fish Warriors.
The Golden Fish Warriors, yeah. Most of them are named after the Warriors, so. My original feeder fish, it was Steph and Aisha. Unfortunately, Aisha got eaten by the great blue heron.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Steph is a single guy now.
What kind of fish do you have?
They're feeder fish that we bought, put in the pond mostly, and then we bought a few of the fancier ones that are, goldfish that are, they don't get big, but they're a blend between the koi fish and a different type of fish that has like a long flowy tail. Interesting, most of the fancy fish got taken by the heron, and the feeder fish and the babies that they had. Bindi was the mother. She's a fantail, but she's tough, and she survived. Steph survived, and all of the babies that were bred feeder fish stock all survived, which is kind of, how that goes, right?
Exactly.
The fancy ones didn't make it. The feeder fish that are used to, swimming for the bottom of the aquarium to save their lives, they all survived.
Oh my God.
The lesson in life.
The fancy fish are obviously more delicious.
Yes, and also we're trusting. They're like, oh, it's a bird. Look, it's a bird looking at us. So, yeah, it's interesting that the feeder fish, including Steph, who I've had for probably 7 years, they all seem to know how to hide and survived, even the gold ones. Draymond survived. He was a fantail, but he's black, so it's easy. The darker fish tend to survive because they're harder to see. But all of the fancy white and gold, especially the ones that had white and gold and long fluffy tails like Clay, he died. They got Andre. My heart is broken, but this was back in April, so yeah. So we haven't added yet, but we've cleaned it up, and we're thinking we might add a few. But the feeder fish are, hanging in there, and they're a mix of fantail and goldfish, so they're tougher.
Yeah, my experience with fish and seeing other people's experience with keeping fish is that they've always been pretty. I had some friends who experimented with indoor aquariums and exotic fish and saltwater aquariums, and always very, very, very hard. And
that's hard.
And I actually had one. He actually had one situation where he basically had a mass extinction event inside his home aquarium.
Oh my God!
Oh no!
Out to sea, which is not very good. I will not go into details.
Oh dear.
But
Yeah, pond fish are a little easier as long as you get the pond water right. And, we have a waterfall, and John's a landscaper, so he actually built the pond. He built it because we have a little fountain in our lanai area that, in the bamboo, that I got the bright idea to go save the lives of 2 5-cent feeder fish. And that was Aisha and Steph about 7 years ago. And they outgrew it. And so he said, I'm going to have to build them a pond. Well, a year later, we had a 1,200 gallon pond in the waterfall. And it's quite beautiful. It's just, you just got all the lush plants growing around it. And yeah, it's a change from when, when I'm here versus when I'm in the city and, stepping over homeless people. But quite different here. Yeah. And I did, though, by the way, on a Friday, I went to the Dignity Moves
how was that?
Interim homeless site with Mayor Matt Mahan of San Jose and Elizabeth Funk from Dignity Moves. And it was amazing because quite close to relatives that I have here, maybe 5 minutes from the house of one of the relatives that I visit fairly frequently, and literally didn't know it was there. I pass it every day. It's kind of, tucked in the back, very private space, very quiet. But I didn't even know it was there. Frankly, my relatives didn't either. So, what we did notice was a huge reduction in encampments. There's a Lowe's over by that area. And there's all these very expensive condos that look out on this area that is, the other side is Caltrans, and they keep it clean because San Jose threatened to sue them. And the camps, the tents were just lined up. And then I was in the city for about a month, just around when this was opening, and I came back and they were all gone. And so I asked Mayor Mahan, how did that happen? Because my relatives and I noticed that, I went to visit and I drove by the Lowe's and it was gone. And he said, they're all in here. He said, we offered all of the first thing we did, because we promised the neighbors, was tell all of the people living in tents in a mile or two radius that they had to move in here and accept services. And if they didn't want that, then, they couldn't stay here, and we would just keep taking their stuff, breaking down the encampment. And there hasn't been a single tent coming up since. And I met some of the people there that, had been, and a couple of them were, like this one woman is a former nurse, and during the pandemic, she lost her home, and, they've got her on track. These are people that will eventually, like a woman like her, she's determined. She, doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs. She's determined to get back into her line of work. She had gotten COVID, and, there are stories like that. And there's more stories of people that have had substance issues and things like that. But, and again, it's similar to Community First Village in Austin, which Mayor Mahan and Elizabeth Funk are visiting this fall, which I have for years said San Francisco officials should go and visit, and not one ever has. I even invited Mark Penny off to come and visit with me. They really, do a great job, and San Jose is modeling itself in a similar fashion. Well, in Community First Village, they actually allow people to live for life. It's a very large, 30 minutes outside of Austin, huge amount of acreage. So it's very different in that way. But the founder there described them as, what we call the worst of the worst, the hardest people to get out of homelessness, the tenderloin people of Austin, and they have an 89% success rate.
Wow.
Keeping them there. So, and they don't just kick you out if you make a mistake. There's no sobriety requirements, and it's similar at this place. But what Mayor Mahan said is that what won't be tolerated is drug dealers on the site, using of drugs on the site. If they come in drunk or high, they're not going to get kicked out, but they'll get a talking to. And and if they cause a disruption in the community there, then they will be dealt with. And I asked him, how come I don't see, because at the Dignity Moves place up in the city, you'll see encampments, you'll see drug use right outside. And I asked Mayor Mahan, how come that doesn't happen here? He goes, because I won't tolerate it. It's a very well known, and the everybody agrees with it, that everybody knows how I feel, that it will be enforced. And he said, and I don't allow it. I won't allow it. And that's the thing I keep saying, Daniel Lurie, you got to stop allowing this, because right now, you're far enough into your mayorship that you got to stop allowing this. And when you hear Matt Mahan say that in front of a homeless site that is absolutely spotless, and there's not a drug dealer or user or camp to be seen, then you have to accept the fact that the difference is enforcement.
Exactly. Okay, it is 11:06. I'm going to go ahead and do my usual formal intro. Welcome, everyone, to the Sunday Brunch Safe Space, hosted by the Voice of San Francisco. I am Mike Heggie, the editor-in-chief, here with editorial director Susan Dyer Reynolds, and Elizabeth Statmore, who is a teacher at Lowell High School and has been contributing to The Voice on a number of education-related subjects, most notably the issues with the current ethnic studies controversy. And we wanted to book some time to talk more about that in detail and see what the future is, both in terms of things that the public should want and or don't want. Elizabeth, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Let's see. Oh my God. So I'm a math teacher at Lowell. I've been at Lowell for a number of years now. I think 11 or 12 years now. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is how research is affecting or not affecting the what we're looking at and using in San Francisco classrooms. So a few years ago, I was one of the lead authors on the Families for San Francisco math report. This was where we took a deep dive into the research on that SFUSD was claiming was proof that it was so beneficial to students to force them to take Algebra 1 in 9th grade and prohibit them from taking it in 8th grade. And based on our research went, well, first it went statewide, and then it went national, and then it went global. And what we did was actually, we ended up discrediting some of the claims, the most miraculous claims that SFUSD had made for its prohibitions and requirements. And what we showed was that actually the claims, such as that the failure rate dropped from 40% down to 8%, were not only wrong, but they were continuing to be pushed by the district and touted in conferences and paid gigs all around the country. And that was just wrong, and it was hurting kids. So because I've been, and so as a result of that, I ended up getting recruited by the math professors who themselves came out against the California math framework. And I told them I wasn't qualified, but they said, yes, you are. And so they recruited me. And so we started testifying at the state legislature. And even though the math framework did end up getting, the California math framework with some of its bogus claims still ended up getting passed, the workarounds have become enshrined as the default standard. So now students are starting to actually receive SFUSD offered 8th grade algebra. And so, so we made a difference there. And one of the things that made me realize is that there were a number of other areas in which SFUSD is making research claims that the research, claims of miraculous outcomes that are proven by research. And when I started looking into the research, I found that much of what they're claiming for ethnic studies is very, very similar to the problematic claims that they made about math. And so that was where my latest column started.
Interesting. We provide some examples there.
Okay, so there's actually, the thing is that there are 3 layers of this. There's 3 levels. The first is that there are research problems with the research itself. There are policy problems. Second, there are policy problems that are created from the research problems. And then there are the self-inflicted procedural problems that SFUSD has created for itself. So let's look at the first level. So research problems. There are actual problems with the research itself, and a number of leading mathematicians, statisticians, and social sciences researchers have all pointed out that, there are these 4 foundational articles that the researchers claim show these miraculous gains for our most vulnerable students, which is why ethnic studies should be made a graduation requirement. So they're claiming that there are these benefits. But what the researchers have actually gone through, what other researchers have gone through and shown, is that none of those claims are actually proven by the research. The research itself is of terrible quality. It's very poor quality. And the leading researchers find those claims insufficient. And so the conclusions here are that, not only do the miraculous benefits not exist, but the gains were actually much more modest than were claimed, and the research itself is problematic and unreliable for policymaking. So as late as a couple of weeks ago, the curriculum and instruction supervisor for San Francisco Unified for ethnic studies was claiming, but there are these miraculous effects that happen. And it's like, dude, have you read the research? The research doesn't show what the research claims it's showing. So those are the research problems. And then there are general policy problems that arise from the research. So since the research basis is so thin and insubstantial, San Francisco Unified is using that research as its board policy to justify making twice as big a graduation requirement as the state itself is calling for. So twice as much. And this was the Allison Collins claim back in 2021, where they basically said at a board meeting that if 1 semester is good, 2 semesters must be better.
Allison Collins being one of the recalled school board members, probably the most strident of them.
Yes, that is correct. The one who made the nasty anti-Asian comments on Twitter.
So and tried to convert her house to a single family home, while she cried about poor people.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, exactly. So twice as many semesters is twice as much cost. So instead of spending $2 million a year, or instead of spending $1 million a year, providing what really is, there is good reason to have ethnic studies. This isn't about canceling it. This is about making reasonable, research-based, evidence-based decisions about how we're implementing this. Instead of spending $1 million a year, which is what it costs us, we're spending $2 million a year. That's during a budget crisis when that's almost, that every additional semester is an additional $1 million in unfunded cost. And that leads us to the problem of, like, how is that SFUSD even going to measure its impact given there's flaws in the basic research? And then there's all the self-inflicted procedural problems. The way SFUSD implemented this is through a graduation requirement that they implemented through board policy. Board policy can only be undone through other board policy. So this isn't something that the superintendent can just change. So that's a problem. They're also taking money for a graduation requirement from the enrichment funds. The curriculum was never vetted or approved. Teachers are inflicting their biases on students by supplementing the curriculum with false and distorted or misleading information and claims, including stuff about how the Red Guards were such a positive influence on society.
Yeah, that's actually amazing. The newspapers, and we picked up on that pretty quickly. I just was completely flabbergasted by that.
That's crazy.
It's bonkers. It's bonkers.
And all you have to do is watch the last scene of the Last Emperor to know that the Red Guards were not happy people. If those are the
and we're not positive influence.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's just, so students are being taught false information. The number of complaints to the Office of Equity in the California Department of Education, the Office of Direct Investigations, the complaints are increasing. That increases costs. The sequencing problems mean that students don't have the background that they need. They're making this a 9th grade requirement. Graduation requirement, but the problem is that students don't know, they haven't learned the prerequisite material that they need to assess or challenge or expand on what they're being told. So this is indoctrination. On Tuesday night, the board is being asked to approve an expense of $100,000 for materials that they haven't seen and haven't approved.
Oh my God.
And, the 2-semester requirement as opposed to a 1-semester requirement means that students have even less choice or agency to take elective courses than they want. So goodbye computer science, early computer science classes, or additional math or other things. We have a 7-period day now, which also reduces choices. So there's all kinds of chaos that they're just accepting, based on, in my opinion, and actually not just in my opinion, based on 35 researchers, experts in the state of California, and more, based on flawed research. So we really should put a pause on this and make thoughtful decisions. But we're now, through procrastination, 3 weeks away from
this course at all?
The start of school. No, there's no prerequisites. So 13 and 14-year-olds are just they're basically being indoctrinated as opposed to being educated.
Do they get any background in, sorry to keep interrupting, but
no,
I'm not familiar with San Francisco's middle school requirements for history. I would tend to think they would need to have some kind of background in history in order to have the right viewpoint, not necessarily viewpoints, but knowledge going into this.
Correct. I mean, the state of California, which passed a law called AB Assembly Bill 101, the ethnic studies requirement, requires 1 semester, but that 1 semester is supposed to come in 11th or 12th grade when students have already taken world history and U.S. history. I mean, how can you critique stuff if you don't have the basic foundational knowledge to use as evidence for your claims?
Amazing.
So it's really bonkers. And we've now entered this game of what I think of as, it's like a 3-dimensional game of chicken. Everybody's saying, if this doesn't happen, then I'm going to fill in the version of hold my breath until I pass out, or sue or whatever. The board is saying, the staff is saying, based on the board members' questions to staff, this showed up on Friday on the Board of Ed site. The question from a board member was, what impact would not approving the cost of this unapproved textbook curriculum have? And the staff say, without approval, curriculum and instruction would not be able to pilot, stick a pin in that for a moment, would not be able to pilot voices in the 25-26 school year. Ethnic studies teachers would continue to use the current SFUSD ethnic studies curriculum, which is locally developed and is what has received national attention for its errors. And so this is a board mandated required course, 2 semesters. And they're talking about calling this a pilot. Well, a pilot is not a graduation requirement.
Yeah.
We can't make sense of this. So I think that it seems like there's going to be quite a number of families who are going to show up, and students who are showing up to say, what the heck is going on?
That's amazing.
Sorry to be so long-winded about that.
So who's teaching it? Who's assigned to it? Like my dad taught, for example, history and geography. Would he be a person that was made to teach this, or who's getting to teach this?
Well, that's a really interesting question. There is no credential required for ethnic studies. There's no specified credential for teaching high school ethnic studies. So as long as you have some high school teaching credential, you can be assigned to teach ethnic studies. So it's really by individual school. So in some schools, it's only being taught by social studies, history and social studies teachers. But in other schools, you could have a PE credential, you could have a health credential, you could have a science credential, you could be credentialed in Korean language. There's no standardization of credential for this. So it really is up to the site administration. So the school site, the principal and assistant principal at the high schools to figure out who's teaching what.
Wow. I mean, amazing. I don't know why this surprises me when we look back at, the board president that was there previously, who had, what did she teach for like a semester? She was 30 or something. Lopez, that's, the whole.
We really want to go into Juliana Lopez and her fiance and.
Yeah.
Clearly not the best, she didn't have the best, make the best choices in life. And yet here she's the, head of the Board of Education. I don't know. I wrote extensively about the board at the time, but I don't know as if I see a huge improvement. Better than who was there, I suppose, but I don't know. Maybe they're just not quite as off the rails, but at least they're not digging into Wikipedia to call Abe Lincoln a colonizer. But I don't know. Apparently this research is about on that level. No.
Oh, God.
Yeah, there's, there are some of the problems with the research itself include things like claims are made with no citation. Claims are made, research is attributed to the wrong study and the wrong researcher. They claim that C students, by taking ethnic studies, they claim that, and this was research about SFUSD itself and our program, they claim that C students magically became B+ students, so that they went from the bottom 10% of performance to the top 25% of performance. That turns out not to have been the case.
God.
It did not magically solve the attendance problems that the research claims it did. It did not magically increase graduation or college enrollment. So these are not reasons to cancel a course. I want to be really, really clear about that. Students do find some value in this, and that seems like a good reason to do valid evidence-based research. But excuse me, as the 35 researchers wrote to the state superintendent, their quotes are pretty blistering. One of their three main conclusions was, quote, given that the ethnic studies model curriculum was presumably drafted by expert educators in the field of ethnic studies, the embarrassing carelessness with which this section was written, inaccurate and mistaken attribution to empirical research, or no attribution at all, offers a very poor impression of the academic rigor of this ethnic studies model curriculum and of the field of ethnic studies more generally.
Interesting. So I've got.
That's not something you usually read.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just. And this is the other thing that I would love to ask myself about where the experts came from. We've got a question from one of our listeners, Robert O'Reilly. He is saying, what is the official FSUSD official purpose of ethnic studies according to them? And will anything be measured against that objective?
Well, the purpose is, and I believe it's on the website, but generally the idea is we live in a very diverse, multi-ethnic society, and most children are exposed to other cultures and value systems through public schools for the first time. And so it is healthy and wise for them to learn about other cultures, other histories, other societies, in order to be functional and productive citizens. That's actually a really, really valid thing. These are children that we're talking about. They do need to learn this, who they're working with. We want them to be effective and successful. And we want them to see themselves in what they're learning. So that's all really, really good. But we should be using good research, not garbage research.
I have another question from from Griffin. He asked to ask Elizabeth if you could clarify what they're going to be talking about at the Tuesday board meeting.
Yes. So the only thing that there are multiple issues, but as far as ethnic studies goes, the board is supposed to take a vote on approving the $100,000 payment for the textbooks for this quote unquote pilot of a graduation requirement, which is required for schools starting in 3 weeks. They are voting to either approve or decline the expenditure, the $100,000 expenditure on these textbooks for a curriculum that none of the board members have seen and none of the public has seen. So the general approach requirement from the state, approving curriculum is one of the board's top jobs. So the fact that they're voting on something they haven't seen, vetted, or approved seems like a kind of an abandonment of responsibility.
Yeah. I also suspect, this particular meeting, which I think begins at 5 p.m., or for the public, the doors open at 6:30 p.m. There's also going to be a hearing on the Dragon Gate charter school, which I think is going to be a higher profile issue, at least in the short term.
Exactly. So I think that is the issue that I think they would like to focus most of the attention on. But public comment is public comment. So people are going to discuss whatever it is that that's important to them.
Interesting. Because here's the thing that I ask about: where do they get these experts? One would assume that when you're talking about experts, we're talking about people who have actually studied it, who actually studied the subject, who have actually gotten some credentialing in the subject, maybe published some monographs about the subjects, and then having them come back and dictate policy for the district. And the problem that I see is, and this is probably because of my usual paranoiac view of things, is I look at the way these policies seem to be cobbled together without much thought. And then I look at things like, well, the vice president of the teachers union is a member of a communist organization. It's literally, actually, there are two of them. There are two vice presidents who are literally members of communist organizations, one of whom has publicly spoken in favor of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Oh my God.
And,
yes.
And I just get to wonder, what role does the union play, or the union members play in this? Do they consult, or do they browbeat these experts who are making the policy, or are they in there making the policy with these people sort of standing around hiding under the desks, etc.?
Well, I think there may be, they actually have a seat at the table, because under the teacher's contract, the union has the right to ensure that teachers are a part of the discussion. So that's the contract. So that's what the district has to abide by. But the experts, I think the thing that I found so alarming, having gone through a doctoral program myself, was the alarm in the voices of the quantitative researchers from outside of ethnic studies, who were finding the ethnic studies research of itself so alarming and so weak that they felt compelled to raise this issue in public. Now, usually researchers, in academia, sort of at the university level, it's not very common for people to criticize each other's the quality of their research. Usually they will argue about the quality of a claim. They'll say this claim isn't necessarily substantiated, but these people are saying, as you heard in that quote, they're basically talking about, in the name of, honesty and academic integrity, they're raising questions about the field of ethnic studies as a legitimate academic discipline, which is really, I find that pretty much unheard of. And nobody seems to be raising that question, I guess, because it is sort of delicate. But these researchers wrote a letter to the state superintendent and to the president of the State Board of Education to say, this research is not up to snuff. Are you really sure that this is an appropriate basis for making policy for all 2 million or 5 million of California students? So the fact that, so the union has a place with the district, because the union is one of the partners that the district has negotiated with to work with. But I think that these are things that the public, in my opinion, this was a crisis that I thought the public needed to be alerted about, because this is a really, really big requirement that they're that they're pointing out. I mean, you have to take more ethnic studies in San Francisco to get a diploma than you have to take of health. And health is a pretty important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, especially nowadays, I would think, because there's so many people, either younger, my age and younger, who seem to have very odd ideas about health they get from ads on social media, etc.
Oh my God. Yeah. The first thing my doctor says to me whenever, I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so whenever I say, oh, blah, 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 she says, do not Google it. Do not Google it.
Exactly.
She says, just call me. So that's one thing nice about One Medical. I just get on the Zoom and, the first thing she says is, you didn't Google this, did you? I said, no. A lot of my friends, sadly, they get all their health information on Google. It's crazy some of the stuff people have said to me. So I think health is super important. The other thing I think that my dad was saying, even when he was a high school teacher years ago, was that, they need to have education on finances. We know that only 50% of Americans own stock, for example. We know that less than 50%, maybe even 60% of people have more than a month's bills in the bank. The lack of financial intelligence that I've encountered over the years, in my 20s with friends that just had no idea how important it was. I had a friend once borrow the rent money for me and then come home with a really nice top that she'd gotten for me at Nordstrom. And I said, you did not spend the money I loaned you for rent on that. She says, no, I put it on my credit card. So I feel like there should be some education in the, ninth graders, for example, on, how to open a checking account, how to, my dad marched me down to Bank of America, when I was 18 and said, we're going to open a checking and a savings account. I wasn't always successful.
It turns out there is actually a requirement. That is part of the college and career requirement.
Okay.
There is some requirement about that. But here's the problem. If everything gets written up in law as a graduation requirement, if everything is a mandate, we're running out of space in the schedule. So are we going to extend high school? Are we going to make high school longer than 4 years in order to accommodate all the graduation requirements? Are we going to cut other things? And this is really, I feel like we're getting to a place where the state needs to take a look at all of the requirements and really rethink what are we requiring? And if everything is a mandate, then there's no flexibility. So one of the reasons why there's fewer slots now, why there were fewer elective slots now than ever before in California education history, is because everything is a mandate. So when the state changed mandated that the start time for high school could not be before 8:30, that threw things into chaos, because in San Francisco, what it's meant is that we've had to reduce our schedule down, the high school schedule, from some schools had as much as an 8-period day. Now we can only have a 7-period day. And with a 7-period day, the only way to meet all the requirements is to use a modified block schedule, which means that no class meets for more than 4 encounters a week. That means that actually kids are getting fewer courses and fewer electives and less choice and agency. So if everything is a requirement, then we're settling for less than we really should. And so we really need to get the legislature out of the business of passing piecemeal one-off requirements and rethink the structure as a whole. Because if you don't have enough time for science classes or for art and music, which for a lot of kids are the reason to come to school and get exposed to everything else, I don't know what we're looking at. What are we doing anymore?
So one of the things it's my understanding that in general, the status quo for teacher curricula or school curricula doctrine is still based on a vision of the U.S. economy that is sort of the late post-war period, late post-World War II period, and it hasn't really had the chance to change from that. Is that true? Or
there are a lot of claims about all of that, and I'm not sure that there's really evidence about that. The basic structure of education hasn't changed much since then, except that it sort of has, because we didn't have, block schedule and stuff. But I think that we should, there's really an opportunity for us to reconvene and to think about what it is that we want our education system to accomplish, and then to design something that meets those requirements. But there's no way that we can do that right now with all these little one-off requirements that all eat away at the central goal, which is to prepare students for college and or career, or both.
Interesting. Absolutely amazing. And so in terms of what people can do about this, I'm assuming step one is to either watch or go to Tuesday's meeting.
Please. Yes. Yes. And if you're not able to make the meeting, then write an email. Send email to the Board of Education, the superintendent, and the Board of Education. Their emails are all available on the website for the Board of Ed, and tell them what you think, because they do actually read and count all of the emails, and it has a huge impact. Making your voice heard has a huge impact. You should also please think about running for school board, because this is a super important function in our society, and we need engaged citizens to participate in this and not just be using it as a stepping stool for higher office.
Right. I mean, this is one of three things that I think are one of two issues that you see with school boards across the country. You either see it pushing forward for careerism, for aspects of the school administration, or you see it as a venue for political extremists, which you don't necessarily see that in. I would dare say that you don't necessarily see that in San Francisco, but at least on the right, there does seem to be some leaking through from the left. But it's either political careerism, or in other places, and not necessarily that far away. All you have to do is go a few miles outside of San Francisco, and you can see people on the right-wing extremists who are also using school boards as an emotional issue for family voters to build their careers on and to put out their policy ideas, which are just as harmful as the ones on the left that we have to deal with.
When I see some of the past presidents and some of the people that have led the school board in general, I mean, Shamon Walton, I clearly used it as a stepping stone, that and his connection to the SFUSD and Harlan Kelly and YZD and Dwayne Jones, and, the clear, handpicked supervisor for D10 for Harlan Kelly, leading the school board. I mean, it was a stepping stone, nothing more. And I think that's unfortunately the case. And I just know from listening to my dad, who was a straight shooting guy from, moved to San Francisco in 1953 from Jamaica, Queens, and New York. And I just remember, he did not have any tolerance for administration. He just never wanted to be a part of it. All he wanted to do was teach and coach sports, which he did. But he had a lot of issues with the board and administrators. He just didn't see eye to eye. He thought he used to say that I'm a bunch of phonies. he didn't believe they cared about the kids. He believed it was all just, even back then, a stepping stone to them getting to somewhere else.
Older coffee and school teacher.
Yeah, he was the real deal, my dad. Yeah. But, if someone was, those were the days. If someone was absent, he would go show up at the door and knock on the door, find out why they weren't in school. He was there all hours, coaching after school, teaching driver ed back when they had a chicken break. Remember that? I personally don't, but I do remember the stories of almost going through a red light. I think twice he had to use the chicken break. Why is the PE teachers are always made to be driver ed teachers? That's always been a weird thing to me. But
we don't have that. That's been.
I know. It's scary. I'm sure you guys, as I have passed the caution student driver cars, and they're just these beater cars, and the people that are teaching don't look like they know how to drive any better than the teachers and students.
But there is one more thing that I would really put in a plug for, and that is especially for people who are really established or considering maybe a second career or a third career. Really consider teaching, because it's a really wonderful life. I was in tech for many years. I worked for Steve Jobs for and with him, and I started a number of companies. Yeah, at Next, and then into with him when he had returned to Apple. But teaching is, I have to say, it's a great life. It's not just a great career, but it's a great life. And I say this as someone who's in the middle of my 10-week summer break. And for me, and let's be clear, that 10 weeks, we are only 10-month employees. We only get paid for working 10 months of the year. But for me, my time is worth so much. There's so much that I like to do and want to be able to do. And so that time is really, really precious to me, and it isn't available in many other careers. And that
is an absolutely huge thing. I have to say that when I was a kid, I thought that all kids' fathers had, at the time, we had 3 months off. So we would go spend 2 weeks at, my dad owned a beach shack down in Santa Cruz, and like 4 of his teacher buddies and all the families would get together there. And then we'd head back east, because my Sicilian grandfather on my mother's side had said, if you take my little girl to San Francisco, you better bring her back to see me or I'll be looking for you. And so we would go back east. And I just thought, but by the way, we would drive, and my dad, ever the, geography, history, teacher and sports, and he coached my baseball teams. We'd go to every stadium to see baseball, but he'd also take me, for example, to Gettysburg, and he would recite the Gettysburg Address. So it was a a learning vacation because he loved to teach, and he still taught even, you know, no matter where we were. And, you know, across the country, how many people we would run into that said, Mr. Reynolds, you were my teacher, and you were the best teacher I ever had. And they'd recite something that he taught them. And there's not very many. And I worked at Apple too in college, and it was a great company. But there's not a lot of jobs that you can have where the person you run into in Nebraska remembers you teaching them something from history that sticks in their head.
Absolutely. And, you know, I never leave work at the end of a work day and feel like I have wasted a day.
Exactly.
Or like my time was being wasted. And kids come back. And living in San Francisco, I'm always running into former students.
Yeah.
And it is a wonderful life, and you make such a huge difference. And yes, there is a lot of garbage that you really have to, there's a lot of nonsense that you have to deal with. But 99% of the time, you're not dealing with that. You're dealing with kids, and you're changing their lives. And that makes such a huge difference. And I want to encourage more of the people like us who, you know, who really want to, you know, who have a lot to teach kids, because most kids don't know many adults other than their own families. So it's one of the reasons why teachers have such a powerful impact. So you can always consider getting credentialed and doing this. It's really worth it. And plus you have a lot of autonomy in your day. And the kids are a delight, no matter where you teach.
Yeah. My dad loved it. I can tell you, he absolutely loved being a teacher. 30 years, absolutely loved every, you know, the only part of it he didn't like was the school board and the administrators.
Yeah, that's the nonsense.
Yeah, the nonsense. But the kids he absolutely loved.
Yeah, loved the best part.
Yeah, and he made a difference, like you. He made a difference, and you know, just intervened in a couple situations that, you know, that made a big difference in the lives of not just the kid but their families. I mean, when he was the basketball coach for the varsity team at Sunnyvale High, they were, you know, at the time Sunnyvale was, believe it or not, considered a really rough school. He came in, and you know, they were, you know, nobody wanted to. They'd lost like 4 coaches. My dad came in and turned them into, you know, state champions. I mean, you know, you can't do that kind of thing in most careers. You know, just makes such a huge difference. And again, those kids came back later and said, you know, I'd probably be in jail if it hadn't been for you in the basketball team. So it is a I saw how rewarding it was, you know.
You know, and it's really fun when you start. I mean, there's kind of a whole second chapter that you start seeing when you discover that your, you know, one of your former students is now the transportation legislation aide to your own state senator, or is the analytics coach for the Portland Trail Blazers.
That's great.
Okay, wrong team, but you know.
Yes.
But that's
amazing.
You know, it really is. So big pitch for considering education as a late career, because it really is wonderful.
So I've got a request to speak from Maine to SF, which I'm going to go ahead and approve and have them give their comment on what they've heard today. Hello, can we hear you? Hello?
He's muted.
Okay, can you unmute yourself?
There he is. Oh, he's muted again.
See, this brings up one of the main complications of working on X is the various technical veins.
Oh, there you go.
We are. Hello, are you there?
Always great to hear you. This is Greg Chofsky. Always great to hear you, Dr. Statmore.
Hi, Greg. Thanks.
Good to talk to you again. I want to pile on to what you were saying, because, you know, I was tutoring 3 boys during COVID at Mission, and you know, now 2 of them are in college, 1's in the military. It is profoundly rewarding to help those kids out. You know, just want to jump on that and say, you know, you're absolutely right. It was probably the most rewarding thing I've done in my career.
Wow. Nice.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, especially during COVID, that was a time where they needed it a lot, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No,
I remember when I was working. Oh, go ahead.
No, just they needed it badly. I mean, kids were so isolated during COVID.
Yeah, I was working back then, or at least during the first wave of COVID, I was working for Platinum, monitoring all the different city councils around Northern California. And there was this incredible, very emotional discussion at the Sacramento City Council about what the kids were going through because of lockdown. And, you know, I'm not going to argue about lockdown being avoidable or not avoidable, like some others might, but there obviously needed to be a more adequate substitute of interaction for these kids during that period, because, you know, some of these kids were considering killing themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
At least according to the testimony we heard. It was pretty amazing.
Wow.
I think years from now we're we're only going to start to understand what COVID did to us in many different ways.
Yeah, our third co-host, who is in Europe with her daughter, in fact, Lily, Erica Sandberg, her daughter, went through COVID both, I believe, as a end of her high school and then also part of college. And, it's just, I've asked her about it. She said it was, a very bizarre time in her life. And they didn't get to experience a lot of the stuff that we did in a normal, whatever normal is, but in a normal way. I don't think people quite understand the impact that might have on them even later in life.
Yeah, I mean, but it's funny. I was reading the other day some other research that was talking about how one of the most important differences in the long-term impact of a really powerful negative experience is whether we adults help kids to encode that in their brains as either a trauma, which is like a problem, or as some kind of an opportunity for growth or something from which they can find meaning. And that's I don't say that to be Pollyanna, but teaching kids to find meaning in their lives generally is really something that it's hard for us teachers to do, but I do try to do that within the context of what I'm teaching them. The idea that we're learning this not because it's in the curriculum, but because it's important for building this other thing that you want to be able to do and accomplish. Connecting things to a sense of meaning is really, really crucial, and it's not something that our public health system is really equipped to do. But I wish that we could equip them to do it, because it's one of the things that really helps kids get through.
Yeah, sure.
So we are approaching 12 noon, and I figured, first off, I wanted to thank Elizabeth for her insights and contributions. Thank you so much for
thank you, Elizabeth.
Be with us on Sunday.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And if people are willing to stick around, I think, Susan, you wanted to talk about some kind of light thief who's going around.
I just had a quick little, thing about, everything that San Francisco is dealing with and going through. I just keep seeing this one guy, this Ben Davis, who, did the lights on the Bay Bridge, and now he's somehow managed to, worm his way into the Serpent in Golden Gate Park and put lights on that. And I'm just curious that, why is the Art Commission, which, is problematic. I mean, you can talk a little bit about this guy that they're funding for his, absolutely ridiculous to do a podcast about. Yeah. I mean, are you kidding me? He's going to do a piece on the, Weather Underground. And she's, this quote, a leftist icon.
Before forging checks to raise money for people who want to bomb people.
Yeah, and then she was actually involved in the Brinks truck robbery and murders that Chesa Boudin's parents were involved in.
Right.
But so now we've got that, and we've got Ben Davis, who's managing to put, somehow he's going to get, he it turns out he's the one that pushed, became the sponsor for this dragon serpent thing that's, snaking down Golden Gate Park's, promenade. I'm over it. Like, we have so many other important things, and here this guy's out grifting again. I only need $11 million more for the lights on the Bay Bridge. I only need $5 million to put lights on the Serpent. And why is San Francisco so gullible? I mean, the lady in Embarcadero, the statue there, that's an old art, that's an old piece from Burning Man. Are we literally just going to take these pieces from Burning Man? And I have friends that go to Burning Man, and I saw that at Burning Man. So basically, you've got these already done sculptures, and we're paying these artists to brush them up and add some of Ben Davis's twinkly lights and cost the city millions. This is my rant of the day. It's like, come on. And then, $30,000 to this Toshio, whatever his name is, who thinks he's a journalist, but he's just, all he does is, rail against San Francisco officials, and not in a legitimate way, just, calling Daniel Lurie a right-wing Nazi, and this, and we're giving him money. I mean, it's just absurd to me. That's my rant.
I think we may want to try and get a new test for whether or not you get money from the Arts Commission.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Is there a test?
That test should be.
No, there isn't.
I think the test should be, have you asked Chris Larson yet? I mean, because I actually like the Bay Lights. I wish that they were up all the time.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you put things up all over the place, and try to make it look like Shanghai from the James Bond movie every night, it's going to lose its appeal. Stephen Martin Pinto is here and wants to say something. So let's see what he has to say. If we did not lose him.
There. Stephen? Oh, there's muted again. There's that weird muting thing. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There he is.
Hey, I just had a question. If the Park and Recs is as broke as they say they are, who is paying for all this art that's being put up in Golden Gate Park? And I actually worked the marathon this morning, and I kind of began to notice a trend that we're just this art that's being put along JFK Drive and in the park and now the Great Highway. It's just kind of being like accumulating in kind of like a nonsensical manner. It's becoming kind of like a junkyard for bargain bin art. Right. And I guess my question is, who is paying for this? Is this like private donations, or is it city money, or a combination of both?
Well, I suspect a lot of it is coming from Arts Commission, which is a separate agency.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean,
it's still taxpayer money.
It is still taxpayer money, but it's a different agency. Therefore, Phil Ginsburg gets to claim it as a separate agency. The thing that gets me
bargain bin Burning Man art. I love it.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
What gets me is, and this sort of goes back to the old progressive criticisms of the management of the park, and not to defend any of that, because there were people on that side that said we need to protect the native species of Golden Gate Park, in which there are none, because it's a park and not a forest. But it is
man-made.
It's still meant to be a place where you can experience some semblance of natural areas.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be a theme park.
Yeah, and this is what's kind of like concerning to me, because I drove by the dragon, the Loch Ness monster, whatever we call it this morning.
Naga the serpent. Naga the serpent.
I wonder if they told the Arts Commission it was Quetzalcoatl to get money from the mission.
It's Naga the serpent, and it has and the captainess, but I don't see the captainess part.
Well, but I'm kind of with you on the idea that like natural or like green areas should remain green and natural, and instead of like a giant bath toy in Stowe Lake. So it's just
So you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of those summers in Santa Cruz. There was on the boardwalk, there was this really cool but rickety sea serpent who surfaced about every 10 minutes. And as a kid, I can remember my friends and I all standing around waiting for this guy to come up. He would come up, and then like smoke would come out of his nose, and then he'd go back down, and there'd be bubbles until he came back up again. And that's kind of what it reminds me of. And I don't know, probably 15 years ago or so, I wrote a story called Phil Ginsburg Wants Golden Gate Park to be Disneyland. And I think I was ahead of my time, because I saw it then with him trying to bring in an outside vendor, for a concessions vendor from Arizona, to run Stowe Lake, because they were going to do so many things, which they never did. Kicked out the family that had run it for decades. I wrote a whole series on that, and all of the public records I got and everything that I got from that whole time during Phil Ginsburg's reign, which in my opinion should end. He's been there long enough, time for some new blood. For years I've seen him as just wanting to create a gaudy, a gaudiness. I mean, they were talking about having boats like swans and things, and so like, no, just give me my rickety rowboat that I've been going in since I was a kid, or where my boyfriend in high school, gave me a promise ring, and I don't want a gaudy swan boat. I just, I just feel like they're, the whole JFK Drive, the big giant. So a couple weeks or 3 weeks ago, I think I was on the Great Highway, and it was really foggy, and all that I could see in the distance was this giraffe, and I thought, what does that have to do with anything? Put the sea serpent down there. That makes more sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of to the point where like you could like haul your junk out to the Great Highway and just dump it off, and someone's gonna like think that it's a bunch of art, but really it's just your,
Yeah. Anybody has some giant Adirondack chairs?
3 broken flat screen TVs I could do that with. Can I borrow your truck?
Yeah.
And then you can get Ben Davis to put some lights in it, and then he'll support it, and then he'll go out and say, I only need $1 million more to put my lights on these 3 broken television art pieces.
Yeah. But like, I look at Golden Gate Park, and like, there's a lot of work to be done. Like a lot of maintenance.
Oh yeah.
Thin out some of that ivy, that overgrown brush. Make it more accessible for people. I just think that like we're kind of like focusing on the nice to have and not the need to have. But yeah,
I don't even know if it's nice to have, to be honest.
I mean, I hope it's nice to have, but like the essential, like take care of the park first. Take care of the overgrown weeds and make it look a little bit like it's being cared for.
Agree 100%, and that goes for the naked lady at whatever she's supposed to be down at the Embarcadero. Crossing the street over there, I don't like her blocking my view. I mean, it's like the view is fine. I don't need some big wire lady in my way. I guess has Ben Davis gotten his lights into her yet? I'm sure he must have some kind of proposal out, because I only need $4 million more to put lights in the naked lady. I mean, it's just enough.
Well, the thing is that when a lot of this, part of the problem here is that the sourcing is tired. These people have built up these connections, which means they've been around, which means that their stuff is tired. It's not new, it's not innovating. The same guy who did this thing that's at the Ferry Building now, and which is boring and frankly obnoxious.
It is.
He also did that sculpture that was at Hayes Green for a long time, which was much more dynamic and I think much more approved by the public. And it's like, okay, you're a one-trick artist. Go do something else. Come back when you have another trick that's worth funding, not the same old stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did also want to talk about. I know that we want to bring a focus on the school board meeting this Tuesday, but I also wanted to highlight what's happening at the Board of Supes, because this is the last supervisors meeting before the summer recess, and they're doing a lot of stuff that's newsworthy is going to be on the docket this Tuesday. this includes stuff like, for instance, the corrected or compromise legislation for placing of shelters. This is the one that the Mayor Lurie has offered some input on, and essentially says that if you want to put a shelter in a neighborhood where there's already more shelter beds than homeless people, you can't do it. If you want to put it within a certain distance of another shelter, you can't do it. Otherwise, you're going to use based on metrics where you're going to put your shelters. So the first vote is on that is Tuesday. There's a ban on automated rent setting. Some property management firms are using algorithms to set rents, and so this would ban that. Legislation from, I believe, Brenna Milgar about use size limits for commercial spaces in certain commercial, already preset commercial districts, including Castro and North Beach. I can't imagine what Aaron Peskin thinks about this, and I certainly hope he's spinning in his chair because of it. But basically, it's going to make it more flexible if you want to either subdivide a commercial space or make something bigger.
Oh no!
But yeah, there's a lot of people who already have theirs in the neighborhood, etc., who are not very happy about that. Raphael Mandelman's he's got a follow-on to legislation he did a couple years ago, which essentially gets rid of gas kitchens or gas stoves in new construction, which has not gotten as much ire from industry and the feds because it's got some outs in it. But this new one is, which our friend Mark Joffe has already commented on, is going to extend that to new large-scale renovations. That if you want to do a major renovation of your kitchen, it has to become all electric.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons to that. If it has the same level of exceptions, it might go. But we have to remember what happened in Berkeley, where they basically just wanted to ban all new gas infrastructure, and they got kicked in the head by the courts.
Yeah, I mean, again, I grew up with electric, but have cooked it with gas ever since I moved back to San Francisco years ago. And now when we did the remodel of my stepmother's home in Los Gatos, we actually added gas when it had been electric before, because I am actually a pretty serious cook, and you cannot do the same kind of cooking on electric that you can do on gas. Period. Just period. And
I thought that you could. I'm sorry. I thought that if you have induction, you could, but then you need to upgrade your electrical service.
Oh yeah,
and isn't that one of the big bottlenecks? The
main issue is cost. The electrical service, the electrical use per wattage is more, and electricity costs more than gas. And
but we also don't have enough electricians in the state of California, certainly not in San Francisco, to do. I mean, like that's gonna lengthen the building and permitting process, isn't it?
Yep.
I would think so. Yeah.
And unless you have solar, which we did for my stepmom's house in Los Gatos, we did solar, and still we're paying, a true up at the end of the year that's grown tenfold over the last 15 years or so. Unless you have solar, electricity is through the roof. So it's just, and don't get me wrong, it's still cheap. It's cheaper than paying PG&E every month, but and then the old houses, my old Victorian and Edwardian in San Francisco, I mean, electricity, they're just not very insulated, and you're already paying through the roof. So it's kind of a rough sell. But for me, it's more comes down to cooking and the difference in an open flame versus cooking on any kind of electric stove. I've cooked on induction. I hate it. Cooked on your basic electric stoves. I hate it. You'll never see an electric stove in a kitchen, in a professional chef's kitchen in a restaurant.
Right.
So would they be, for example, excluded? I mean, if like restaurants?
Yeah, I think
they would have to be.
This is dealing primarily with residential kitchens, and I suspect that if you look at this, Mandelman has had this track record of creating flexibility where he can, and also making sure things that if they aren't proving to be practical, to see if changing them around or getting rid of them, which is what he's done with these contracting ordinances, including the one where he tried to modify the contracting ordinance and the rest of the supervisors wouldn't take it because of one committee, which we all saw. We reported on it in the newsletter last week, and all the other papers reported on it eventually as well. But still, I think it's kind of a bugaboo for a lot of people. I mean, people are used to it. It's also sort of a bugaboo for the right and for libertarians as well, because it's seen as a little bit too much micromanagement of people, I guess.
Speaking of which, do we know when the vote comes up for the Board of Supervisors to approve or deny the $2.8 million settlement to the Coalition on Homelessness for suing the city?
I think I'm going to have to look that one up. I did see, but there are settlements. There are quote unquote interesting settlements that are on Tuesday's agenda, although I did not see.
Oh, what are they?
Well, there's an $850,000 settlement to United Layer for basically breach of contract over some data center placement. So that's a big settlement. A 1.3 million property tax refund to 415 LLC for their property at 701 3rd Street, which is the Hyatt Hotel down there on 3rd Street. They call it the Downtown Hyatt, even though I tend to think of it as a Soma Hyatt.
Now, is this a refund? Is this money back that they want back from Prop C?
No, it's property tax.
Yeah, so the property isn't worth as much.
Yeah, it's not commercial. It's not related to commercial rent or Prop C or anything like that. It's just.
I'm assuming it's because the property is worth less than it used to be, and they want to reassessment.
Probably because of hotel income. And $1.1 million settlement to the POA.
What?
Yeah. And can you guess what the dispute was over?
I have no idea.
Overtime.
Oops.
Yeah, it's always over overtime.
Oh, wow.
So there you go.
Wow. Well, I just had one thing to say about the Coalition on Homelessness settlement. I have something coming out this week about changes to the commission that oversees the committee that oversees the funds for Prop C, and getting rid of Kristen Evans and Jennifer Friedenbach, who engineered Prop C and lobbied for Prop C and now oversee the funds, which is a complete conflict of interest. I beg of the board, because she reapplied late. I fear I may have accidentally tipped her off when I posted something about it. But Kristen Evans, like many commissioners, lazy commissioners on and hundreds of them in San Francisco, I think she just probably forgot that her time was up. But now, Shimon Walton, took time away from his comedy, his new comedy career.
He's a podcaster.
Yes, he has a podcast, and he's been off in Alaska doing quote comedy. To basically defer this so that Kristen can apply, even though there's a perfectly qualified person who's there that probably would have been approved on July 7th had she not popped her head up. I'm absolutely disgusted by this settlement. Basically, this just sends such the wrong message from the city attorney that if you sue the city, we will bribe you and to get rid of you by giving you $3 million, which we know isn't going to their attorneys because it's the ACLU who did it pro bono. That's no secret. The Coalition on Homelessness, as they claim, this money will help the ACLU basically continue to monitor the city, which to me just sounds like another lawsuit waiting to happen. And yet this is the same woman who runs the Coalition on Homelessness who just is getting $3 million for suing the city over the tents that she, Kristen Evans, and Dean Preston and the coalition handed out. Now they're complaining that, we wanted to, they handed out the tents. Then when the city said the tents have to go, they're a nuisance. Then they sued to keep the people in the tents. It's the most ridiculous thing that over the last 20 years, I have been a nonstop critic of Jennifer Friedenbach and Kristen Evans. They're all trust fund babies. They're all wealthy white women who absolutely have no expertise in this business whatsoever. And it's just time to cut ties. And frankly, the Board of Supervisors could send a big message by denying the settlement. And so I'm asking the Board of Supervisors, at least the semi-sensible 7 of them, to deny the settlement and send a message to the Coalition on Homelessness that you will not hold the city hostage anymore.
Okay, well, I looked it up in Legistar, and it's basically only just been received and assigned.
Okay.
So, and again, you've got it's going to go to GAO, the Government Audit and Oversight Committee. So I would assume it will show up at the next available meeting of that committee basically in September sometime.
It's just absurd. I mean, I just can't even say how absurd it is. And I'm working on another piece about the three wealthy women who run the homeless industry in San Francisco, which is Jennifer Friedenbach, who is an almond heiress, Kristen Evans, whose father ran Alcoa Aluminum and has a $12 million home in San Francisco, and she's a hobbyist bookstore owner, and the woman Lydia Branson, who runs the Gubbio Project, whose in-laws are the heirs to the NJB coffee fortune, which was sold to Nestle, and they have a home on the Presidio Wall, another $12 million home. She's over at the Gubbio Project basically telling people at 16th and Julian that they have to put up with this because she, quote, lives in the hood, she said, in East Oakland. Well, that is not where she lives. She may have an address that pops up that she, I don't know, P.O. box or whatever, but she lives in a very, very, again, a $7 or $8 million duplex that's assigned to her former in-laws over in Corona Heights. So these are people that should not be anywhere near any city money, and they should not be running the homeless. There shouldn't be a homeless industry. There should be no such thing as permanent supportive housing. It should be temporary supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is not sustainable and is not a thing. And the sooner that San Francisco's officials realize that, the sooner they can start to be more like San Jose and make some sense of what they can and cannot do and what they will and will not do.
All right. And I think if, unless there are some other items that we want to talk about, I think that's it. I think we can take this to a close, unless you have any other things to submit, either of you.
I just want to say to visit thevoicesf.org subscribe to our fantastic newsletter, which Mike Iggy does every Thursday, comes out, and he always has a scoop or two in there that you'll get first in your inbox, and with his original intros. You can make a donation, be it $5 or $5,000. You know, every bit counts towards independent journalism to allow us to be that one, you know, ironically alternative voice that's in the media out there in the city and Bay Area right now. And then, you know, if you're not already, you know, follow us at The Voice, the X account, which is at the VOSF.
Perfect. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today about that important issue of ethnic studies in education and some of the weird ideas that it's having to endure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And to everyone else who came in and contributed today.
Thanks for spending your Sunday with us.
Yes. And have a great rest of your Sunday.
Bye.